When I look back, I realize my whole life feels like a collection of stories about people digging their own graves with their own rules. And me? I just followed their instructions. Nothing more. Just did exactly what they told me. And that's the irony. When you obey an absurd rule literally, it backfires on the one who invented it. Back then, I was still very young, working at a tiny computer shop in my hometown. Calling it a shop is even too generous. It was just a small room on the ground floor of an old Soviet-style apartment block. Shelves piled with dusty boxes, the faint smell of old electronics mixed with my boss's cheap deodorant. And the boss himself? Picture a man with thick mustache bristles that quivered whenever he got angry. Arrogant, self-satisfied, and convinced he was always right. Whatever happened, he never admitted fault. If something went wrong, it was always someone else's fault. The customer didn't understand, the supplier screwed up, employees were too slow. But never him. That obsession with shifting blame was one of the main reasons I eventually quit. Though, honestly, the lessons I got from him proved invaluable later. My main job wasn't just sitting at the counter or selling mice and keyboards. No, I had to go out to clients' homes or offices, install software, fix printers, set up the internet. For a guy my age, that felt pretty cool. I got paid for something I already loved doing, and I rode around town on my old motorbike, feeling like a movie character, the young computer doctor, rushing to save people from viruses and blue screens of death. But my boss had an obsession. He thought I was too slow. Didn't matter how long a job actually took, 5 minutes or 2 hours, for him, it was always too long. And he never understood that technical problems weren't all the same. Sometimes clearing a browser cache was enough. Other times, I had to rescue a failing hard drive with someone's entire company data on it. The worst part? He loved comparing me to former employees. "When Sergey worked here, he did everything twice as fast," he'd complain. But I remembered how, when Sergey was still around, the boss called him slow too, saying the guy before him had been much better. That was his favorite trick, making the current worker feel guilty by holding up some mythical, perfect predecessor. And then, one day when his mood was particularly foul, he came up with a brand new rule. "From now on," he said, narrowing his beady little eyes, "you must text me every time you arrive at a client's place. And again when you're done. And you don't leave until I say so." At first, I thought he was joking. "So wait, you want me to just sit there until you reply?" I asked. "Exactly. Otherwise, you're just wandering around town wasting time." Our town, by the way, was tiny. There was literally nowhere to wander. But arguing was pointless. I just nodded and said, "All right, if that's what you want." Day 1. I followed his rule to the letter. Arrived, texted, fixed the problem, texted again, and waited. Time slipped away as I stared out the window, waiting for a message. Honestly, I spent more time waiting than working. But fine, a rule is a rule. Day 2. Same routine. I loaded up my motorbike, went to the first client after lunch, sent the "I'm here" message, finished the repair, maybe 20 minutes, sent "done," and waited. 5 minutes. Silence. 10 minutes. Nothing. I called him, no answer. Another 10 minutes. Still nothing. So I went outside, sat down on the curb under a tree and thought, well, if I have to wait, might as well enjoy it. Pulled out my phone, watched some videos, scrolled social media, chatted with friends. Half an hour passed. Then an hour. Then another. By the time 3 hours had gone by, I was still sitting there, waiting, because my boss hadn't replied. Finally, a call. Where the hell are you? He barked. Still at Client X's place, I said calmly. What do you mean still? That was your first client after lunch. The whole day he's gone. Get back here. I rode back to the shop, and he pounced on me, practically foaming at the mouth. Why did it take you so long? Are you kidding me? You're unbearably slow. I looked him dead in the eye and said, completely straight-faced, I was following your rule. You told me to text after each client and wait for your reply before moving on. You didn't reply, so I waited. I would never disobey your order. He froze, just stared at me speechless. Then he stammered. Well, sometimes you need to use common sense. If I don't answer, it means I'm busy. Turns out, he'd spent the whole day at home dealing with contractors and had completely forgotten about his own rule. Of course, he never brought it up again. But complaining that I was too slow? Oh, that never stopped. Some people just never change. That was the moment I learned a crucial lesson. If someone insists on a ridiculous rule, don't argue. Follow it exactly, and watch them choke on their own instructions. That story with the computer shop was just the beginning. Life had plenty more absurd rules waiting for me. And as you can probably guess, I obeyed them to the letter. I was 16 then, freshly licensed, just got my driver's permit, and I felt like the king of the road. You could imagine what it's like for a teenager. No more begging parents or older friends for a ride. I could finally sit behind the wheel and go wherever I wanted. Well, almost wherever. One afternoon my parents asked me to go grocery shopping. Nothing unusual. I was happy to. Any excuse to drive was a celebration back then. The feeling was incredible. Freedom, independence, adulthood, all in one. On the way back, I got this idea. Why not swing by my friend's place? Just for 5 minutes. Show him that I've got my license now, that I can drive alone. For a 16-year-old, that felt like the ultimate flex. So I did. Pulled up, chatted for a few minutes, then went home. But when I got back, oh boy. My stepmom, Mary Ann, exploded. We did not give you permission to go to Bill's. We said, the store and straight back. I tried to explain. But yesterday you let me go by Matt's. I thought it was fine. Didn't matter. She and my dad got furious. And then they dropped the new, iron rule. You are not allowed to drive anywhere unless we explicitly say so. Period. Just because we let you once doesn't mean it's always allowed. It stung. I felt like they didn't trust me. But a strange thought settled in the back of my mind. What if I take this rule literally? A few days later, the chance came. My 13-year-old stepsister Tina had been on my nerves all day, picking fights, messing with my stuff, pushing every button she could. Then, right before evening, she suddenly turned sweet. Brian, she said in her sugary voice, time to take me to ballet. Since I'd gotten my license, driving her to ballet 3 times a week had become my family duty. But this time, I saw the perfect opportunity for payback against her and against my parents' ridiculous rule. I looked at her calmly and said, Sorry, Tina, I can't. Mom and Dad didn't give me permission to drive you there. And without their permission, I can't go anywhere. Rules are rules. At first, she thought I was joking. But when she realized I wasn't, she broke down. Screaming, crying, begging me. Then she grabbed the phone. Called Mom, no answer. Called Dad, no answer. Left both of them frantic messages. Meanwhile, I sat there, listening to time slip away, like in that Steve Miller song. Time keeps on slipping, slipping into the future. I'll admit, I was nervous. My hands were shaking. I wasn't sure I had the guts to take this all the way. But inside, I knew this was justice. They had trapped themselves with their own rule. Half an hour passed. Then an hour. Her class had already started by the time Mom came home. Mary and saw Tina still in the house and frowned. "Tina, why are you here? You're supposed to be at ballet." Tina burst into tears, throwing herself into her mother's arms, telling her version of the story, conveniently leaving out the part about how awful she'd been all day. Mary Ann's face turned red. "Just wait till your father gets home," she shouted, stomping down the hallway so hard the doors rattled. I nearly laughed out loud. Never thought I'd hear someone actually use that line outside of TV sitcoms. An hour later, Dad walked in. Tina and Mary Ann rushed him in the hallway, both talking over each other about what a terrible brother I was. I stayed in my room, bracing for the worst. 10 minutes later, I heard his voice. "Brian, come here, please." I walked out, expecting the storm. But instead, Dad looked at me with a strange expression, almost amused. "Well, Brian," he said, "you did it." "Did what?" I asked. "You beat us at our own game, and there's nothing we can do about it." I blinked. He sighed. "All right, let's be reasonable. We went too far. Tina isn't always fair to you, and that needs fixing too. So from now on, you can drive wherever you want, within reason. You've got good grades, you're responsible. We trust you." I walked back to my room with the widest grin I've ever had. Inside, I was bursting with pride. Because I realized something important. Sometimes you don't need to argue or shout. Sometimes all you need is to take someone's rule and follow it so literally that it collapses on itself. A few years later, I ended up in digital marketing. At the time, I thought I had finally landed my dream job. A promising industry, exciting tools, tons of new skills to learn. The company was small but ambitious. And the man running it, the founder himself, was charismatic, full of ideas, and had a very volatile temper. At first, everything looked perfect. He said all the right things. "Success is your credit, failure is mine. Good is better than perfect. Don't chase perfection, just make it work." I believed him. Honestly, it inspired me. Especially since they didn't hire me out of nowhere. I had to clean up the mess left behind by my predecessor, the VP of Marketing. That guy had a team of 4 and $1 million budget for the year. And what did he accomplish? 5 deals. 2 of them worth less than 10 grand. When I heard that, I felt this fire inside me. A whole world of opportunity. They gave me barely a tenth of that budget. But I dove in headfirst. Within months, I had beaten last year's numbers in every category. More leads, more deals, more revenue. All on scraps. I lived for that work. Managed projects alone, recruited freelancers, learned new platforms, even ones not strictly in my job description. But I couldn't say no if it helped the company. By the end of the year, I pulled together a report, laid everything out, and brought it to the founder. "Look," I told him, "here's what we achieved." All this, with minimal budget and no team. He looked through it, eyebrows raised. "Wow. I didn't realize you turned things around this much." So I asked for a raise. My salary was $8,000. The average in our region was 4.5. But specialists with my skills were earning 13 or 14. I asked for 12. He gave me that thoughtful look and said, "I'll think about it. We'll revisit this later." Guess what? He never did. Every time I reminded him, there was a new excuse. "Not the right moment. Bigger priorities right now. Let's talk next month." Around and around. I quietly started looking for other jobs. But then one day, something happened that changed everything. I made a mistake. Nothing critical, just a misconfigured ad campaign. We spotted it, and fixed it within hours. No client suffered, no damage done. But my boss, he went nuclear. He stormed into the office, screaming so loud the walls shook, slammed the desk with his fists through papers, and finally he roared, "Pack your things and go home! Think about whether you even want to work here." I didn't even have to think. I looked him straight in the eye and said, "You know what? No, I don't want to." And I started packing. He turned redder, shouting even louder, "How dare you! I'll call security right now to throw you out." But I stayed silent, and it drove him mad. I calmly said goodbye to my colleagues, picked up my stuff, and left. But here's the twist. In my country, labor laws are strict. What he did, firing me like that on the spot, counted as a legal dismissal. By law, he had to give me 30 days' notice. He didn't, which meant he had just set himself up for legal trouble. I went to a lawyer. They told me, even though he'd thrown me out, I still had the right to full pay and benefits for 30 days. And I didn't have to lift a finger. If he tried to force me to work during that period, it would only strengthen my case. By then, I already had interviews lined up. And here's the delicious part. Every single new job was offering me nearly double what he paid, which meant I was going to job interviews on his dime. And since I was the only person in the marketing department, until they hired a replacement, nothing would get done. If he couldn't fill the role in 30 days, too bad. I wouldn't be around to hand things over. His own outburst, his own order, "Pack your things," backfired spectacularly. He wanted to intimidate me, but instead, he lost his only marketer, set himself up for a lawsuit, and paid me to sit at home while I found a better job. That was the moment I realized just how sweet justice can taste. You don't even have to fight. Sometimes you just follow their command literally, and the universe does the rest. After marketing, I somehow ended up working in a call center for a while. Only 3 months, but trust me, it left a mark. I was 18, sitting in a tiny cubicle with a headset on, answering calls, helping people reset passwords, recover access, answering basic questions. Nothing too complicated. During training, they told us, "Speak naturally. Be friendly. Don't sound like a robot." And I did just that. Clients loved it. I even got good feedback. But then we got a new supervisor. She was obsessed with scripts. Her eyes practically glowed red if someone deviated even a single word. Eventually, she snapped and said, "If any of you stray from the script even a little, you'll get written up." I thought, all right. You want script? I'll give you script. Next call. A man rings in. "Hi, my account's locked. Can you help me quickly?" I switched on robot mode. "Hello, thank you for calling. My name is Brian, and I sincerely hope you are having a wonderful day. How may I assist you with resolving your technical issue?" He paused. "Are you serious?" he asked. But I kept going word for word, even hitting that absurd line about fully understanding the uniqueness of your frustrating situation. He sighed, endured it, and we finished the call. Right then, my supervisor walked by, stopped, and listened. I watched her face shift from smug confidence to confusion. When the call ended, she asked, stunned, "Why were you talking like that?" "Because you said to follow the script exactly," I replied. She had no comeback. The very next day, she told the team, "All right, just make sure to cover the key points. You can sound natural again." 1 day of literal obedience, and her iron rule collapsed. Later, I worked as an analyst at a big corporation. Different place, same story. There, the sacred rule was the overtime culture. If you stayed late, you were a hero. If you left at 5 sharp, you were branded lazy. But I always finished my work on time. Closed tasks, prep data, handed everything off neatly. So why stay late just to pretend? When I asked for a raise, they denied me. The reason? You come in at 8 and leave at 5, while others stay late. And you don't offer to help the overloaded ones. In reality, help meant sitting around for no reason. So I decided to play by their rules. Every day at 4:30, I emailed my manager. Do you have any extra tasks for me before the end of the day? She always said no. I logged every single one of her replies. Sometimes I'd even stay until 5:15 or 5:30 just to see who actually worked late. And you know what? The office was usually empty 5 minutes past quitting time. Months later, I landed a new job with a 60% pay increase. And guess what happened? My old company suddenly offered me the same raise and a promotion. Too late. Their own rules had driven me out. And then there was my time working on an ambulance. This was in a semi-rural area. The nearest hospital was an hour away. We worked 12-hour shifts 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Normally, we arrived by 5:30 so the outgoing crew could hand over gear and leave early. It was a gentleman's agreement, nothing official. But one day, management sent out an email. No one is allowed to arrive before 6 o'clock anymore. They said it was costing the company too much, because sometimes calls came in before 6, and the new shift had to take them, meaning overtime. We shrugged and said fine. Started arriving exactly at 6. And then winter hit, the busiest season. Calls poured in nonstop. Crews were staying 2-3 hours late. And by law, if you've been driving for 14 hours straight, you must stop, no matter where you are. Even in the middle of a highway. The company bled money paying all that overtime, scrambling to figure out how to get us back to base once we'd maxed out our hours. After 2 months of this mess, they sent another email. You may arrive at 5:30 again. All because they wanted to save half an hour of pay. Their rule had blown up in their faces. Looking back, I see the same pattern again and again. Supervisors, bosses, managers, they make rules to control people. But when you obey those rules literally, the weakness in their logic shines through. They crumble under their own weight. And sometimes, all it takes is one worker who's willing to just follow orders exactly. But the juiciest stories came later, once I'd grown more experienced and started working in bigger companies. That's where I saw how fragile rules really are, especially when managers invent them for their own convenience. There was one time I was part of a small hiring team. We were looking for someone to fill a critical role. Smart, organized, able to work under pressure. After a few rounds of interviews, we had a solid shortlist. But then my department head pulled me aside. Listen, he said, we need to hire this one particular girl. Why her? I asked. Because I want her on the team. Later, I heard the rumors. She was basically his almost girlfriend. He was trying to impress her. I showed him her scores. She'd failed most of the assessments, showed up late to the interview, couldn't explain even the most basic terms in our field. But he waved it off. Doesn't matter. Do as I say. So I did. I processed her hire, gave her extra training, tried to support her. But you can't train away carelessness. She messed up contracts, sent confidential client data to the wrong company, approved an order 10 times over budget without even checking the numbers. One client left us because of her mistakes. Another pulled back because of the delays she caused. When upper management started asking questions, my boss suddenly tried to deny everything. But I had kept records, his instructions, his orders, everything. Within a quarter, he was reassigned to another position, stripped of hiring authority. She was quietly let go. Lesson learned: if a boss wants to play workplace Romeo, he'd better be ready to pay the price when his crush sinks the business. Another time, I was working for a large retail company. By then, I had the education and licenses to qualify for a higher level position, better pay, more responsibility, a nice title. But the job market was tough, so I stayed on as a floater, a temporary employee rotated between different stores in the region. The region was huge. The farthest store was over 100 miles from my home. And of course, that's where they sent me for training. The area was rough. Employees at my level had been robbed before, even threatened with weapons. Sales were through the roof, turnover insane. After training, I almost never got rotated anywhere else. It was basically permanent. I asked to be reassigned closer to home sometimes. But my boss said, "You're the only one who can handle this store." I didn't believe him, but what could I do? Then a colleague told me about company policy. If a floater works more than 50 miles from home, they're entitled to mileage reimbursement, plus meal expenses. So I filled out the forms, brought them to my boss. He took them, and never signed. The next time, same thing. Then he said they got lost in the system. But my colleague showed me how to fax them directly to accounting. So I did. One day, my boss called me in a panic. "Stop sending those forms. Send me closer to home." I told him, "And there won't be any forms." He wouldn't budge. But then he offered a deal. If I stopped filing for reimbursement, he'd make me a permanent employee at that store, with a raise and bonuses. I agreed. But years passed, and the raise never came. Eventually, the place got so toxic I asked to be reassigned back as a floater. That's when he said the words that lit a fire inside me. "You were never permanent. We just kept you here out of habit. It was easier for everyone." I was furious. I started job hunting, and finally found something better. But before leaving, I made one last move. I had kept detailed logs of every shift, and the policy had no time limit for filing reimbursements. So I went back, 2 years' worth of mileage forms. All those 100-mile trips, all the gas. I skipped the meal claims, too much hassle with receipts. But the mileage alone was a fortune. I faxed them in batches. In my final weeks, I sent dozens of forms every shift, and the checks started rolling in. Mileage reimbursements aren't taxed. It was pure cash. When my boss found out, he exploded. Called me, screamed, even brought in a security manager. Threatened to sue unless I paid it all back. But I had his own emails where he admitted I was still a temp. I politely forwarded those to him and said, "Sorry, but you lied to me. Which means our deal is void. I had every right to claim this." In the end, I walked away with over $21,000 and into a new job that set me on the path to my dream career. And you know what the sweetest part was? Not the money. It was looking him in the eye and saying, "Your lies cost you more than you'll ever admit." Looking back at all these stories, the bosses, the stepmom, the supervisors, I see the same pattern. They all tried to control me with rules. But the moment I followed those rules literally, the rules collapsed under their own weight. It's like a chess game. They thought they were the kings, untouchable. But all it took was one pawn, moving exactly as ordered, to topple the board.